This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast.
The views expressed on the following program are not necessarily those of WPSL, but we're the ones who've encouraged you all along to like and share them with all your friends and neighbors on social media and your folks next door over the fence there. Because Rudy's Health Insurance and Martin County Roofing team up each week at this time to present the African American scene. And in preparation for Black History Month, we've moved Rudy's show to Mondays, and that's what all this is about. So let's get started with tonight's show. Here's your host, the one and only Rudy Howard.
Good evening, good evening, good evening. Always glad to be with you here on a Monday night this week. And we'll be doing Monday nights while IRSC basketball is in full swing. But don't let that deter you. Well, we're going to have an open mic night, and the number is 340-1590. That's 340-1590. Were you surprised that DeSantis dropped out? I wasn't. You pick a fight with Mickey Mouse, not one of the greatest political moves that someone could make who's pursuing an opportunity to be president of the United States. That's just like when President Trump criticized John McKenzie, favorite son of Arizona, and then wondered why he didn't win Arizona. I don't know about that, but anyway. One of the things that I have spent some time looking at, and I encourage you to do the same, it's a 4-part series. I've watched 2 parts. The Great Divide on PBS. And what they do is they look at a conservative point of view and a progressive point of view to try to determine why it is that we have become so divided in America. And I find it quite fascinating, and I will finish it because I find it enlightening. And as I've told you before, one of the great things that I've been trying to do is to find out why it is we are so divided. But one of the things that was said this past week, which I find deeply disturbing, was Nikki Haley's statement that we have never been a racist country. And Haley's statement is, America has had racism, but America has never been a racist country. Haley's statement seems to suggest an attempt to separate racism that has clearly existed in the United States from the country's underlying character. That statement is clearly absurd. That statement is ridiculous, and it's pure pandering. And it's a pandering to some of my audience listening tonight that are feeling frustration over the changing demographics of America. I understand your concerns about the changing demographics of America. And if I were you, maybe I would have some concern too, but I doubt it because I have an intimate knowledge about people different from myself. But one of the statements that really gets under my skin is when someone says, speak English or go back to where you came from. The person that makes that statement is an unenlightened, uneducated individual. Let me tell you why. I've talked about this maybe 6 or 7 months ago. Spanish was spoken in America before English. There were Mexicans in Arizona, New Mexico, California, and Texas before there were Europeans there. There are generations of people in Arizona of Mexican descent, and in New Mexico of Mexican descent, California and Texas as well. So can you tell automatically from someone speaking Spanish they are not American? If you can, you are an extraordinary human being, because those people who have lived in their state for generations are just as American as you and me, but they happen to speak Spanish. So how ignorant is it that someone makes that statement? And I've heard that statement on more than one occasion from some of my conservative associates who seem to feel that if you don't speak English somehow, you are not a person of the United States. Please listen to me tonight and understand how ignorant that statement is. That's an ignorant statement. Not you are ignorant. That's just an ignorant statement because you probably don't understand history. When we say America has never been a racist country, our treatment of Native Americans was an absolute disgrace. They placed bounties on Native Americans. We allowed people to move west and take over their land. We took control of oil discoveries found on their land. The current movie, Flowers of the, oh my God, I can't call the name. And I read the book too. It's a story about the discovery of oil reserves on Indian land and how they were, some cases, killed and manipulated by those who decided that they wanted to take possession of those oil reserves and the money associated with that. We moved Native Americans to reservations. We tried to eliminate their culture. And if anybody is listening and wants to take issue with any of the things I'm saying, please feel free to call me. That number is 340-1590. That's 340-1590. So when we say we have never been a racist country. I'm not sure how anybody in their right thinking mind could make such a statement. And up until that point, to be perfectly honest with you, uh, I found Nikki Haley to be someone who is somewhat acceptable to me. That statement made her unacceptable to me because that is a statement of pandering and it has no factual basis at all. We put native Japanese in internment camps. I'm sure you all are aware of that. In World War II, after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, we went and gathered up a lot of Japanese out of our own paranoia and put them in internment camps while failing to accept the fact Asian people were some of the principals in helping to build the railroad system in this country. But America has never been a racist country. Can we justify that? And we took people who were native born Americans that are of Japanese descent and put them in internment camps. Now, I've talked about Native Americans. Now I've just talked about the Japanese. The African American discrimination was endless. African Americans were initially forbidden to read or write. Now, if you want to put people in a subservient position, hinder their development or their growth, hinder their education. And that's exactly what was done. African Americans were not allowed to read or write. African Americans were forced to live in segregated communities. Desegregation had pluses and minuses. And I was a very strong proponent of desegregation before I understood all of the impacts that desegregation had on minority communities. Segregated communities had teachers, lawyers, doctors, all living within that same community, which were role models young people could aspire to be who were in their neighborhoods. Now, desegregation allowed people who had the economic means to leave those areas and go to other areas where they could afford to have a nicer piece of property, which was not always met with open arms. But again, America was never a racist country. Can you explain that to me? And I welcome your phone call, 340-1590. That's 340-1590. The 14th Amendment was designed to provide African Americans with rights, all the rights of Americans. But though that amendment was largely ignored, I don't understand how anyone could say that when it took the Civil Rights Act of 1965 to get those rights that had been passed in the 1860s in the 14th Amendment, which folks decided they were going to completely ignore. Here's another issue that I think is important, which demonstrates our systematic racism. When Black people protest, more often than not, they are considered to be anti-American. When white people protest, they are considered to be patriots. Take the case of Colin Kaepernick. Not a violent protest. He knelt on a knee at a football game, and he was absolutely savaged about that protest. It was not violent. He was simply trying to make a statement about an issue which was important to him. When white people protested on January 6th, they were considered patriots. They damaged the Capitol, injured Capitol Police, but they were not considered anti-American, even though they were attempting to overturn a proper election of our president, Joe Biden. But now I want you to think about that for a second. You savaged Colin Kaepernick, and some of you called up this show and talked to me about how disgusted you were that Colin Kaepernick took a knee. And some of you sane people have called up and talked about how unjust it has been, the way those people were treated on January 6th because they were protesting their rights as Americans. I would have agreed with you until they started smashing windows and beating cops with flagpoles. That wasn't a patriotic gesture. That was an attempt to bully the system to get an outcome that they desired. And for all of you that accept that as a proper way of trying to handle your disagreement with an outcome, I'm going to call you out and say, you're not an American. Matter of fact, your behavior is anti-American. And I don't care if you don't like it, you can call me up and challenge me on that. But that's anti-American behavior. Because for many years, we as African Americans had to deal with issues that were not to our liking. And we had to continue to strive toward trying to get a legal outcome that allowed us to gain some of the rights that we had been promised under the 14th Amendment. I'm going to take a quick break here, and I want you to think about some of those things I've just said. And that number again is 340-1590. That's 340-1590. Don't touch that dial because we'll be right back.
Is there still 18 to 20%?
Hi, this is Hawk Levy from St. Lucie Jewelry and Coins. I want to tell you all thank you for voting us #1 again. Best jewelry and coin dealer, best gold and silver buyer, and best jewelry store in Port St. Lucie, Fort Pierce, and Vero Beach. Year after year, you voted us #1. Have you been wondering what your valuables are worth? Bring them in. We'll tell you, and we'll pay you top dollar. Why sell to us? Because we buy your jewelry as jewelry, not scrap, and we resell everything on our international.
We'll be running some of your spots at other times during the week to make up. For some reason, those commercials aren't. I found your number, but I couldn't find Martin County Roofing, and then I had to go with what we had. That's all we had for the break. We're fixing to come
Okay.
a moment here, though. Stand by.
All right.
We've moved across the parking lot, but still on US 1 and Walton Road in Publix Plaza. Google us and then come see us last.
WPTV's First Alert Weather on WPSL is brought to you by Seacoast Air Conditioning, family owned and operated on the Treasure Coast since 1982, online at seacoastair.com. Now with a look at our forecast, here's meteorologist Francis Payton.
Another windy evening, looking at mostly cloudy skies, temperatures cooling to the middle to upper 60s for tonight. Your Tuesday will feature more cloud cover, and I wouldn't rule out some isolated rain chances on your Tuesday. High temperatures even warmer in the middle 70s. We will continue this blustery as well as cloudy trend through most of this week. I'm WPTV First Alert meteorologist Francis Payton for WPSL 1590, the talk of the Treasure Coast.
Living in Florida is paradise until your AC breaks down. Seacoast Air Conditioning is family owned and operated for over 40 years. Seacoast Air Conditioning offers service in hours, not days. We answer the phones, show up on time, and fix the problem right the first time.
Comfort crisis, don't roast, call Seacoast.
This is WPSL Port St. Lucie.
We now return the African American scene with Rudy Howard.
Yeah, much of our divide is based on race. I found this information from a National Opinion Research Center from the 1940s. In case you think that what I'm saying has no merit. 47% of residents said restaurants shouldn't serve both white and black people. It's 1940s. 46% wouldn't like to be treated by a black nurse. 31% said white people should get the first shot at a job over black people. Is that affirmative action? I don't know. 71% said black people were less intelligent, and nearly half both agreed that and said it was because they were born that way with less intelligence. Just 39% said Jewish people should be treated the same as all Americans. The rest preferred statements cautioning against Jews intermingling with others. 85% would, now this is 1940s now, 85% would object to a friend or a relative marrying a Black person. That certainly has changed. But we're talking about America has never been racist. 92% would object to their teenage daughter dating a Black person. That certainly has changed also. 58% believed Black people had less ambition. Most blamed Black people's failure to achieve equality more on their lack of initiative than on restrictions imposed by white society. Most agreed that whites had the right to keep Black people out of their neighborhoods and that Black people should respect that right. 1940s. Most 3/4 agreed Black people shouldn't push themselves where they're not wanted. I can think of one person in particular I know who agrees with that particular sentiment. But think about that. And that's the 1940s. But that's what our country as a whole agreed. In my opinion, Black conservatives have given racists a permission slip. Black conservatives have given racists a permission slip. Why do I say that? For many, the goal has been to expand people's thinking about racism and to not boil everything down to an act of racism. And while I respect trying to give us that intellectual exercise, and such people as Glenn Lowry, John McWhorter, Candace Owens, all in that category of trying to say, okay, let's take another look. This is not necessarily an issue of racism. The unintended result of those Black conservatives taking those positions is to give credibility to people who have racist positions. Maybe that, and I'm going to give credit and say, I don't think that was ever the intent of those who took those positions, but the unintended consequences are that they have given that permission slip that I talked about. I have been confronted by people of a conservative ilk who have tried to tell me about people that I previously described as having different opinions of than my own about racism. And that's okay. But denying what has been in the past in terms of being accepted by the white community as a whole is problematic and destructive. You can challenge us to think, there's nothing wrong with that. And you can challenge us to have different thoughts about situations that you don't see as necessarily racist. But those things are not helpful if they're disingenuous. For example, I saw something not long ago by the same gentleman, Glenn Lowry and John McWhorter, who prophesied that George Floyd was not murdered. Now I'm going to repeat. They have been trying to wage an argument that the gentleman from Minneapolis who was convicted of killing George Floyd was unjustly charged and convicted. And somebody that I know pretty well is probably listening to this and is one of those people that believes that. But I don't know how you can believe that when the whole world, not just the United States, the whole world saw it as an injustice. It was right before your eyes. In law, there's a theory called res ipsa loquitur. The thing speaks for itself. And what happened to George Floyd on that day was clear as clear can be. His past, and this is an issue that conservatives like to throw up, like with Michael Brown and other things. His past somehow contributed to his death. The fact that the officer had been previously reprimanded for improper behavior regarding two other people, one of whom also received injuries from a kneeling on the neck, is trying to be ignored in order to be accepted on the wider scale by the larger community. That's disingenuous. That's not helpful. And not to mention the fact the DOJ unleashed a report after an 18-month investigation that showed that there was a pattern of prejudicial behavior toward Black and brown people in that department. How do you ignore that? How do you dismiss the fact that past behavior is to be considered when you're looking at a situation such as what happened to George Floyd? Was he an angel? No. Was that mural on the wall in Minneapolis with a halo over his head, over the top? Yes. But was he killed? Did he see improper treatment at the time when he was being looked after about a phony $20 bill. Don't talk to me about what he did in the past, because what was happening at that moment had nothing to do with his past. It had to do with the fact that they thought he passed a phony $20 bill. Is that treatment commensurate with the crime? And the answer to that is no, it was not commensurate with the crime. And for those people to go out there and propagate that somehow Chauvin was mistreated and treated unjustly for what happened to him is not proper. That is your desire to try to give us to think about racism in another way, when a situation is so clear about the activities associated with George Floyd. You have lost me. And I had some respect for Lowry and McWhorter as Black intellectuals, but they lost me with that, because that's pandering, in my opinion. That's not the exercise of your thoughts as a person being free thinking and trying to look at things from another angle. That is pandering. And I can think of several people, most notably, and I've talked about him before, Michael Steele, who on a political basis, I have disagreements, but he has never, to my knowledge, been a person that has been a detriment toward other people of color. He refused, even though he was the chairman of the RNC, he refused to treat Obama as other. And that's when he gained my respect, because it would have been easy for him to do that. On the other hand, we have Tim Scott, who, if you look it up, was been treated disrespectfully with racist connotation on his entry into the Congress. And he says that the United States has never, ever been a racist country. I have lost all respect for Tim Scott. And it's not just me. I know other African Americans who feel the same. So what's my point? My point is America is a great country. I want you to hear that again from me, who comes on here once a week and then pontificates about all kinds of issues and issues associated with people of color. America is a great country. We have to acknowledge our past and not hide it. That's not helpful. That doesn't allow us to move forward when we are unwilling to acknowledge our past sins. Germany demands, I want you to hear this again now. And again, that phone number is 340-1590. Germany demands students learn about Nazism. It's a requirement We, on the other hand, want to try to deny students about learning about our racist past as if somehow, if they learn that, they will be injured and be demeaned because they found out about things that happened in America in the past. Educating our children about the past is the safeguard for our future. If they understand what we did and where we came from to where we are today, they will be much less likely to repeat those behaviors which we found abhorrent. Can't you see that? The CRT and banning books, changing curriculum, those are not items that make us a stronger country. Those are things that make us a weaker country. And for those people of color who feel somehow to side with that makes them more American, no, it doesn't. Because that is a denial of what has happened to your ancestors and mine. And there's no reason to deny that. Burying our history and the past is un-American. So saying that America has never been a racist country, that is just purely insane and idiotic. I understand that she's trying to pander to those people that support Donald Trump, but tell the truth. We are big boys and girls. We can handle the truth. But somehow we have decided that our children are not capable of handling the truth. When did that happen? When did it happen that we decided they can't handle the truth? They learn from those things that are from the past. And I saw another show recently. We only got a few minutes left, so if you want to call in, you got one more shot. 340-1590. I saw a show recently where a teacher was teaching his class about the past, and in there was some white students, and they were very enthusiastic about learning what had happened in the past and appreciated the opportunity to learn about things that had been done in the past. So I don't know, and they didn't seem to have a damaged psyche as far as I could tell. And there were parents there that were being very supportive of the education that they were receiving from this teacher. Now, you know what's interesting? A person asked me recently, said, "What are you going to talk about this week?" And I told him what I was going to talk about. He said, "You will not get one phone call." He said, "I guarantee you, you will not get one phone call." I said, "You're probably right, but I'm hopeful." Uh, but evidently he was right. And there's enough controversy in what I had to lay out here that uh, hopefully it will give you some food for thought. And you know, if you are willing to think, just as some Black conservatives engender the idea of trying to give racism a different face, I offer you the opportunity to think clearly about our past and understand that that doesn't represent our future. Our future is bright. Our future is really very positive in my eyes, because many of the kids, like in my son's age group, that are coming along, don't carry the baggage of some of the older folks. They see things in a different light. They see people in a different way. And I think all of that is positive. And ultimately, one day, hopefully, their leadership will make us an even stronger country. But the area in which we're doing now, we're pulling and tugging to try to yank us back in a direction that is not hopeful or positive in any manner of the word. So when somebody says America has never been racist, please think about that statement. That statement is so ridiculous. That statement is so contrary to who we have been as a people, and so contrary to the behavior that we as a country have demonstrated against other people who have been within these shores, such as Native Americans, such as what has happened to the Japanese, and such as what has happened to our Jewish brothers and sisters in the past. Now, I hope and pray you can at least be objective enough to understand how ridiculous that statement is, and that you would not sign on to the concept that America has never been a racist country, because we have been. We have gotten better, and we certainly have come a long ways from the 1940s information that I gave you, where 85% of people said they would have a problem with their child coming home with their daughter coming home with a Black man as a date. Come a long way from there, but I don't think that that's a complete winner at this point, but it sure is a lot farther from what that was in the 1940s for sure. But you have the ability to make us even better. And it starts with your attitude. Your attitude about how things currently exist, not pushing them under the rug, not ignoring them or dismissing them, accepting them as facts, and understanding that we can do better and we will do better as a country, because we always have. Because America is a great country. But like everything in life, we can do better. And that's my message each week, that we can do better. And I believe we can do better because we are a great country that can do better. But to say that we haven't had issues or we don't have issues, just like that DOJ report from uh, the government about the Minneapolis Police Department, that was a comprehensive report that showed there has been a pattern of racist behavior. And don't take my word for it. Please look it up. It's out there for you to read. I read it. And they put the Minneapolis Police Department under a consent decree. And what that means is basically there are issues and processes that they have suggested to take corrective action to move Minneapolis Police Department from the problems they noted in the report. So I would tell you, go out there and look it up. And the other thing I asked you about, told you about, there's a program on PBS called The Great Divide, which tries to establish what the changes are and the problems are that have caused us to divide. It's worth your time. It will educate you. And I would like to thank you so much for listening to the African American Scene. God bless and be safe. And I will see you next week right here for the African American Scene.
The African American Scene with Rudy Howard, brought to you by Rudy's Health Insurance and Martin County Roofing, right here on WPSL Port St. Lucie, the digital talk of the Treasure Coast.